Welcome into another edition of Gold and Black Radio. I'm your host, Derek Schultz. The Boilers got off the schneid against UCLA, taking advantage of a one-game week to topple the Bruins at Mackey Arena. Their home finale is tonight, followed by a big road game at Illinois before coming to Indianapolis for the start of the postseason. Can you believe it? March is already here. We're going to talk about all of it next, as we always do with our pal Brian Newbert. But first, a thank you to our terrific Gold and Black sponsors, including Purdue Federal Credit Union, a proud partner of Purdue Athletics, and the official credit card for Purdue fans. Boiler Up. East End Grill and Ripple and Company, two distinctive bistros across the street from one another on the far end of Main Street, the perfect place for your next event. The Whitaker Inn, this Midwestern oasis, is perfect for a relaxing staycation or a weekend getaway. Escape from the ordinary at the Whitaker Inn. The Sand Valley Resort, enjoy winter at Sand Valley with outdoor adventures, cozy lodging, and astounding views. Experience everything from snowshoeing and ice hockey, fat tire biking and curling, to a curated event schedule. Whether it's a weekend getaway or an extended stay, Sand Valley provides the ultimate nature-filled retreat. Start planning your next winter getaway by visiting sandvalleypursuits.com. And finally, the Purdue Institute for Cancer Research. The Purdue Institute for Cancer Research has a history of innovation and one goal for the future: defeat cancer. Purdue brings together world-class Boilermaker scientists from all across the university, conducting cutting-edge research that uncovers new ways to prevent, diagnose, and treat cancer. With your support, cancer research saves lives. Join the fight and donate to the Purdue Institute for Cancer Research today. Disclaimer here, I'm still going to put this in for the next couple of weeks. Golden Black Radio, in the process here of migrating over to Apple Podcasts and Spotify. The episodes are available there. We do appreciate your patience because this process has been a little bit rocky with the Apple Podcast folks. So if you see multiple Golden Black Radio feeds, select the most up-to-date version, and we hope to have that situation rectified soon. But let's face it, multiple Brian Newberts, that's never a bad thing. We have a singular Brian Newbert tonight here on Golden Black Radio as we finally get to recap a win after a four-game losing skid that lasted 2 weeks. It felt more like 3 months. I had sent Brian in about the middle of the first half with Purdue trailing. I'd sent kind of a here we go again tweet about Purdue and the defense. The Bruins were shooting at like a 70% clip at that point. And it seemed, I don't know if it was like the reverse Twitter jinx or what, they really locked down defensively right after that. I know the three-point shooting helped, and Heidi and Lawyer hit a couple of big ones during that 12-0 run, and Smith hit a couple himself to kind of close it out. But I thought UCLA got pretty much all awful shots down the stretch. And while maybe some of that was forced in shot selection, I think a lot of that had to do with Purdue just kind of locking in on that end.
Yeah, and I'd like to thank you, first off, Derek. For about 15 years, I've been meaning to Google the term schneid to figure out what the actual origin of that was in terms of it becoming a synonym in sports lingo for losing streak. Apparently, it originated in the 1960s from the German word Schneider, which means tailor, which doesn't make any sense, but it's a card game thing. So now I know, and now you've pushed me in the direction of enhancing my own knowledge. Purdue, it was all happening again, right? It was Purdue was up 9 in the first half, more than that actually against UCLA, I think. And then UCLA cuts it to damn near nothing by halftime, and then they open the second half shooting like 80% in the first 10 minutes of the second half. That's exactly what had happened, during the losing streak for the most part. And, for Purdue to be in that same position again and completely right itself and get the stops it needed to get and make all the plays it needed to make was pretty significant. For a team's psyche, that has to mean something. I think that they did, quote unquote, dig deep on defense, which isn't to say they didn't in the games before. They just, didn't really have any answers. But they also got every defensive rebound, and that was probably the most important part of it, because you can play the best defense you possibly can and not get the rebound. It doesn't matter. And I thought it was the defensive glass that really made the difference there.
Yeah, and I want to talk about Cam Heidi and the role that he played here in just a little bit, but I wanted to go back to something that happened in the week leading up to the game where Trey Kaufman-Renn, and we've really seen his emergence as a player this season in his so-called junior year, and he calls the players-only meeting, and then Purdue sort of, as you said, Brian, it's all happening again until it's not, and that was a night where Purdue was able to find a way, and I think the default is to go back and say, okay, maybe the players only meeting and enough is enough. And, did they dig deep? I'm reaching into my sports cliche bucket here because,
There's
players
more
only
where that came
meetings,
from. Yeah.
besides Schneid and everything else, right? Players only meetings kind of happen all the time. And sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. I don't know. Sometimes there's no way of knowing what their impact can be. But is there something to the fact that, you're at home, you had a couple of days off and to kind of sit in it in the last 2 weeks? It's the longest losing skid in 5 years. Nobody on the team is used to having a losing skid like that, at least not during their time at Purdue. And you really saw them respond for the first time in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, the players only meeting is one of the most important boxes you can check on the sports adversity bingo card. So I kind of had to chuckle when the term players only meeting came up when they had lost four games in a row. But whether it was the meeting or whether it was just this team is good and, it had a bad week at the wrong time and things kind of normalized. I don't know what the genesis of, Purdue turning around against UCLA was, but under normal circumstances, this game against UCLA at home is a game you always expect Purdue to win because you expect them to win all their home games.
Yeah.
And I think, anytime a team loses 4 games in a row, and the second half of the Indiana game being your most recent observations of this team, I think, maybe warped reality quite a bit. But then again, the reality is kind of what you see with your own 2 eyes, right? So those 4 games, Purdue just wasn't the same Purdue as it was in January. And wasn't the same Purdue that it's been for the last 5 years or so in terms of, making winning plays when they're there to be made. And what turned it around, whether it was this team having their, here we go at the cliches, their come to Jesus meeting, they're closing ranks, they're rallying the troops, they're digging in, whatever it might be, or this was just Purdue playing well again in situations where they hadn't played well before, normalizing. I don't know, but anytime your players are leading the way, Trey Kaufman and Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer seem to lead in this situation, it's a pretty good thing. You know, the best teams police themselves, the best teams lead themselves. I don't think we needed to hear Matt Painter say that. I think that's always, true in sports. And Purdue seemed to benefit from it in that UCLA game. But Purdue's pretty good, and I don't think that stopped being true even when Purdue just wasn't winning these games. They just picked the wrong time to have a bad week. Everybody's kind of had one. You look at Michigan right now, has come back to earth. Michigan State at one point lost 3 of 4. I can't remember when Wisconsin's day of reckoning was, but everybody's had a bad week here and there, a bad 2 weeks, whatever it might be. And that's kind of the nature of long seasons. And, Purdue's just came at a really bad time. I still wouldn't say any of these teams that Purdue lost to are better than Purdue. Michigan certainly isn't. I think if Michigan State had to play at Mackey Arena, that game turns out differently. That's kind of the nature of unbalanced schedules. Wisconsin was really good on that day, but if you played it again 2 days later, who knows if they would have been the same. So I think it's a fairly wide open Big Ten at this stage of the season. It'll be a very open Big Ten tournament because all these teams are kind of the same. I'd still take Purdue over any one of them. That sounds myopic. That sounds homery from a guy who covers Purdue, but I still think they've got the most assets of any of these teams. They've got the 2 best players of any of these teams, and they just had a bad couple of weeks at the wrong time.
Let's talk about, the Cam Heidi performance. Hit one of the biggest shots of the game, maybe the biggest shot of the game. It was kind of the first time that Purdue created real breathing room that seemed sustainable with that 3 during that 12-0 run. And then I don't know if you went out and charted it because you go through meticulously through all of the game and, with your film breakdowns and all of that. But it felt like his 9 rebounds led to about at least a dozen points, maybe even more than that. I mean, he was just everywhere. And I know you were tweeting about it as well. And then Miles Colvin again hit some shots as well. And he's had a stretch of games where, low bar, but he's been able to start making some shots. And I think a lot of the hopes for this team rising in the wake of losing Lance Jones and Zach Edey and Mason Gillis were Colvin and Heidi kind of taking the next steps. And while we've defended them on this podcast and we've talked about these other areas that they've improved and how they've been active, the offense hasn't necessarily been one of them. And I'm not saying that, you need to throw a parade over Cam Heidi scoring 3 points, but because he had this great game besides just the offense, and he hit the one big shot that we say that he needs to make that really can make a difference, can those two now surge back into this and bring Purdue back to maybe what it was in January here moving forward into March?
Well, the important part for those guys is that they make shots, but they make shots alongside them doing other winning things.
Mm-hmm.
And those two guys over the last 4 games now, I think, are shooting a combined 46% from 3. But the reason Miles Colvin's playing more is because he's doing a pretty good job defensively. He did a good job defensively against Indiana. It just so happened he made shots too. Whether those two things go hand in hand, I don't know. I'd imagine they probably do. What you don't want is a guy who's not going to defend because his shots aren't going in. What you do want is a guy whose shots are going in because he's energized by the defense he's playing. Camden Heidi, what he did on the glass against UCLA might have been the difference in the game because, UCLA got back in that game in large part with offensive rebounding. And, Purdue has some fundamental shortcomings on this roster that it has to overachieve to overcome. One of them is defensive rebounding, obviously. And when a player like Camden Heidi goes out there and just takes over a game on the glass, again, he didn't, but it seemed like he got every defensive rebound for the final 10 minutes of that game. He didn't get every one of them, but he got a bunch of them. And that was arguably the difference in the game. Now, whether or not that effort stemmed from him putting the ball in the basket a little bit from 3-point range the last couple of games, I don't know. I think it's more of him kind of developing into more of a grinder. The thing about these two guys is they were like your classic YouTube guys kind of coming in. They were known for their athleticism. They were known for their dunking. They were known or in Miles Colvin's case, he was known for his 3-point shooting, stuff like that. And their development into really substantive sort of winning players has been an ongoing process for those guys, more so for Colvin than for Heidi. I think Heidi was probably a little bit more wired for that coming in and, through the course of his redshirt year. But he had a redshirt year, so he had a leg up on Miles Colvin, who was like 17 when he got to college. So it's a little bit of a different standard for those two guys. But they've both become pretty good, two-way players who contribute to winning even when their shots aren't going in. Now, we've said that a couple of times through the course of the season, and it hasn't necessarily been sustainable all throughout. But if this is sustainable now, it's certainly the perfect time for it.
Contributing to winning, I think, is something you could definitely say about Caleb Furst. And it's weird to think that, he's the lone senior for senior night against Rutgers tonight. Especially given it's a very odd career arc, right? Where he came on strong and was earning minutes right away, and then he disappeared for a while, and then here he is playing a key role again as a senior. But all along, he earned a lot of praise and was given his flowers by the coaching staff and by Purdue fans for kind of being an old school, I'm not going to go into the portal. I'm just going to be here and be available for any role that the team needs me. How will Caleb Furst, you think, and he still has a postseason to go and all of that. How will Caleb Furst be remembered as a Boilermaker?
Fondly, as he should be. I mean, he is your consummate student athlete. That's a compliment. But it's also something that, unfortunately can be a backhanded compliment when it comes to basketball, because when guys have more going on beyond basketball and they're not completely basketball 24/7 guys, it can hold them back. And normally guys make big jumps between year 1 and year 2. If not then between year 2 and year 3. And, Furst never really made that huge jump to go from being that guy who played important minutes for Purdue as a freshman, made some really big plays, to being that guy who looked like the dude that Purdue, prioritized as a freshman in high school, who ultimately got offered by North Carolina, Michigan State, a bunch of other people, because he's a guy who puts a lot into academics. He's going to be a surgeon. He puts a lot into his faith. He puts a lot into his family. He's a husband to be. I'm not sure when their date is. I can't remember, but he's got a lot of balls in the air. He's going to be a great citizen. He's going to be a great human being. He's going to be a lot of things, professional. But when that's somebody's path, that doesn't necessarily always jibe with them putting every ounce of themselves into, developing as a college basketball player. That sounds like a slight. That sounds like a criticism. It never should be a criticism, because this is what college is all about. It's about becoming a successful human being, a well-rounded human being, a good person, an educated person. And Caleb Furst has maxed out every opportunity afforded to him in that sense. He never became, that all Big Ten level player who would have been a really high-end guy for Purdue. Zach Edey had a lot to do with that too. I think we would be remiss to not mention that Caleb Furst never had a moment in his career where Purdue came into a season saying, okay, we need to invest in you. You need to be one of our 5 best players. You need to be one of our 2 or 3 best players. We're going to build this team around you. And thus forced him to be good, as they've done with a lot of other guys. To Caleb Furst's credit, this is a guy who was out of the playing rotation last year, basically when Purdue ended up playing for the national title. Purdue needs him this year, and he's ready. And, Daniel Jacobson's injury provided more of an opportunity for Caleb Furst, and to his credit, he was ready. And he really helped them there in January. He's still helping them today. Some games have been better than others. He's never going to be that guy who goes and gets you 15, 16, 17 points. I think the days of him hitting threes are over, as they should be. You don't need him, trying to score. You need him hustling. You need him throwing his body around. You need him rebounding. And you need him using his defensive versatility to its absolute nth degree. And he's largely done that. And he's been a big part of Purdue having a pretty good season here. And he deserves credit for that.
It'll be kind of a tricky senior night. Rutgers is a buzzer beater away from entering with a 3-game winning streak. And I know it hasn't been a great season for them, but they have 2 pros. Hell, Illinois is back from the dead with what they've done, blowing out Iowa and then Michigan as well. I'm not a big momentum guy, particularly when it comes to entering single elimination tournaments. And I'm also not sure it's best for Purdue, if we're being honest, to make a big run in Indianapolis, given what a grind this season has been. They could probably benefit from some extra rest. But how much importance are you putting in closing strong this week? How much does it, Big Ten title's been out the window now for a while. How much does closing strong really matter here?
Well, I think that, Rutgers and Illinois are both playing well right now. I think that's a reflection of the fact that when you rent teams every year, it's hard. And you're more likely to be at your best at the very end of the season. And I think to a certain extent that's true of Rutgers, which still has some real limitations here. I think Michigan has come back to earth. I think they kind of had a little magic carpet ride going there for a while with their luck and some things that went their way from a whistle perspective. But I think they've come back to earth, and I think they opened the door for Rutgers to come in and damn near beat them. Illinois is they're talented. They're just generally dysfunctional normally. I think they've started to figure some things out a little bit. They've gotten healthy. I think that's probably helped them too. So Purdue's got, 2 games that can't be taken lightly here to end the regular season. And then I think you and I will differ on the Big Ten tournament. I think you didn't have an opportunity to win a championship in the regular season that you probably should have had that opportunity. You were good enough to. It got away. When there's a championship there to be won, go win the championship. I know people don't value the Big Ten tournament the way they do the regular season, but the regular season title nowadays is as random as the Big Ten tournament title. And I think any chance you have to celebrate something that is a championship, I think that's worthwhile. And if I'm Purdue, I would go to Indy thinking I'm still better than all these teams. I don't think Michigan State is necessarily better than Purdue. I don't think Wisconsin is necessarily better than Purdue. I don't think Maryland is necessarily better than Purdue, even though Maryland's playing really well. And of everybody in the Big Ten, they would be the team I wouldn't want to play in the NCAA tournament right now. I don't think Michigan's better than Purdue, certainly. That thing's wide open, and I think Purdue if they can get the double bye. That's the important part of these last two games. They might be the favorite going into Indy. They'd be my pick. I think that 4-game losing streak kind of skewed reality a little bit. You are what your results say you are, but I think Purdue's better than the way those 4 games played out, and Purdue going to Indy as something of an underdog might be right up their alley.
Yeah, I'll admit that take would be different if this was a UConn podcast and we were talking about the Big East tournament, or if this was a North Carolina podcast and we were talking about the ACC tournament, where those events are bigger. And you're right. I think I speak probably for most Big Ten fans in saying that this tournament is still, I know it's like 25 years, hell, it's almost 30 years old now, right? But it's still one of those things where, yes, it's a championship. It's not the championship though. But that said, it especially because it's in Indy and not in. Remember when it was like DC that one year, and it was in New York. I love New York. You love New York, right? The Big Ten tournament in New York.
That was the best environment of any Big Ten tournament I've been to.
I still, but it's still like it's the Garden is for the Big East tournament though.
Correct. Yeah.
Like that's what I had a problem with. I'm not disputing that it's a great environment for it. It's just I don't know. But I have a lot of, and maybe we can talk about that next week.
This stuff is all warped now. Like the Big Ten footprint.
You're not wrong. Yeah.
There are schools in the Big Ten now that are damn near as close to Russia as they are to Rutgers. I mean, it's all that tradition is out the door because they have turned this league into a corporation, and the unbalanced schedules are going to determine Big Ten championships. And I think there's something cool about unifying the belt in terms of winning the regular season and winning the Big Ten tournament. I don't know if that's obviously not on the table for Purdue this year, but I think if you can win a championship here to end this season when you have a championship caliber team, I think that's worthwhile. I think last year when you're the number 1 overall seed, basically, or the number 2 overall seed, not playing those extra games, there's something to be said for that. But when you're a team like this, that's now changed kind of the paradigm of the season because you lost a couple games late in the season. You didn't get the Big Ten regular season title. You were favored to win in the preseason. I think, there's some momentum there to be gained. There's some swagger there to get back going into the most important games of the year. If you're UCLA, you just show up, check in your hotel, and get the hell home, or go wherever you're going next because you've been to the Midwest twice in February already. You're coming back for the Big Ten tournament. You're going to the NCAA tournament. You've got a chance to beat some people in the NCAA tournament. The last thing you need to do is play 3 games and then fly back to Los Angeles on Selection Sunday and then head right back to wherever you're going. If you're going to go back to LA at all, I don't know. But those are the teams that, they're kind of up against it here. But if you're Purdue, just win the damn thing and then go wherever you're going, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, it's an easy commute. And I did want them to win last year just because Wisconsin annoys the bejesus out of me. That's the only reason I wanted
Wisconsin
them to win that
has
game.
That effect on people, don't they?
That's how you know you're good, when you annoy people. And I'm sure a lot of people were annoyed by playing Purdue the last couple of years, as you've mentioned multiple times on this show too. So maybe it's pot calling the kettle black a little bit.
People on Twitter from other schools who think I play for Purdue, apparently, talking crap to me. Yes, Purdue annoys the hell out of people. I don't know why people take it out on me. I don't play. Like, whatever.
Yeah, just the guy. Yeah, just the guy in a flannel trying to cover the game. Just everybody leave Brian Newbert alone.
Just walking the earth like Kane in Kung Fu.
There we go. Rutgers to Mackey, senior night tonight, followed by a short shot to Champaign in the regular season finale on Friday. You can catch Brian's coverage, his wrap, video analysis, the drive home in the car pod after both games right here at goldenblack.com. We'll see you next week, pal. We're going to be talking some postseason basketball. That'll be fun.
All right. Thanks, Derek.
That's our friend Brian Newbert, and that is our show. Thanks so much for tuning in to Golden Black Radio. It is brought to you by Purdue Federal Credit Union, the official credit card for Purdue fans. East End Grill and Ripple and Company, 2 distinctive bistros across the street from one another on the far end of Main Street in Lafayette. The Whitaker Inn for unparalleled comfort and cuisine. Visit the Whitaker Inn. Sand Valley Resort. Enjoy winter at Sand Valley with outdoor adventures, cozy lodging, and astounding views. Start planning your next winter getaway by visiting sandvalleypursuits.com. And the Purdue Institute for Cancer Research, which has a history of innovation and one goal for the future: defeat cancer. Join the fight and donate to the Purdue Institute for Cancer Research today. And don't forget, as always, if you're not already, and I know you already are because you've listened this far, become a member right here for the best Purdue coverage at goldandblack.com. It's the best deal that there is. You get all of the exclusive stuff from Brian, from Carm, from Tom Dienhart on the football side of things, the historical perspective from Alan. You get these shows, you get Knucklehead Central, you get it all. The best spot on the internet to interact with other Boilermaker backers right here at goldandblack.com. Enjoy this last week of the regular season. We will be back with you on Tuesday to talk about the Boilers heading to Indy. But until next time, I'm Derek Schultz. I hope you enjoyed it. This has been Gold and Black Radio, Tuesday edition, right here at goldandblack.com.